At the hospital's anniversary party, my son went around hugging everyone, but when it was my turn, he stopped short and smirked. "Mom, you always smell like disinfectant. I'd rather hug the dog than hug you." Everyone burst out laughing. Then he added, "Mom's only good at cutting people open. She doesn't know a thing about the business world." The laughter grew louder. I smiled as if it didn't hurt, but when I finally opened my mouth to reply, the whole room fell silent. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. My name is Evelyn Moore, Chief of Cardiac Surgery in Boston. All day, I stand under the operating lights where every decision I make can mean the difference between life and death. Tonight, the golden lamps at the Langham, Boston cast a honeyed glow over the banquet hall. Amid the jazz music and expensive perfume, people whisper about mergers, audits, and material costs, while I carry only one last chance for a single person. Behind the stage, the LED board scrolls with the words, "Celebrating 10 years of Moorebuild, my son's company, Ryan Moore." I'm wearing a simple black dress, holding a small box in my hand, a phone, and a name badge. The jazz band shifts to a livelier tune as Ryan steps on stage. He speaks smoothly about innovation, cost optimization, and national expansion. The screen flashes with shining bridges and vast lobbies. The guests laugh, applaud. Senator Charles Clark sits in the front row, nodding with satisfaction. I stand at the edge of the room, watching my son's shoulders straight, chin proud. He used to be the little boy who fell asleep on my on-call chair every night, clutching his red backpack. I remember that the moment he says, "Please welcome my mother, Dr. Evelyn Moore, the woman who inspired me." I step onto the wooden platform. The floor hums lightly under my heels. I think maybe this is a truce. Maybe my son has found his way home. Inviting his mother, in front of financiers and politicians, I stand beside him. He tilts the microphone, a crooked smile tugging at one corner of his mouth. "Mom always smells like disinfectant. I'd rather hug the dog than hug her." Laughter erupts like fireworks. Some faces freeze for half a second, then laugh out of politeness. The MC claps awkwardly. Ryan adds, his tone as light as a needle prick, "Mom's a great surgeon, but the business world isn't an operating room." I stare straight into the light. My hand tightens around the little box until I hear the faint crack of plastic. I don't speak, I don't back away. I simply stand there as I would before a chest about to be opened. Straight, precise, unflinching. A few minutes later, Senator Clark is invited to speak. He raises his glass, praises the public-private partnership, and mentions the medical supply chain that meets national standards. Then, almost casually, he adds, "It's interesting to note that CardiaLink Procurement Group, Moorebuild's key supply partner, was founded by Dr. Evelyn Moore." The room's rhythm changes. Ryan turns his head slightly toward me. I open the box and take out my phone. Inside my drafts are 2 unsent emails I've kept for weeks. Suspend partnership to the entire CardiaLink ecosystem. Report of ethical violations to the federal agency. I tap the screen. Send all. The vibration of phones ripples through the room like a soft rain, faint, but everywhere. The LED screen behind Ryan shifts to the supplier slide. The CardiaLink logo appears with the tagline, "An ethics-driven initiative by Evelyn Moore." Whispers rise among investors' tables. A few bend down to make calls. Chairs scrape, napkins slide. Senator Clark sets his glass down, his voice calm, clinical. CardiaLink is suspending its partnership with Moorebuild over suspected patient safety violations. We stand by those who uphold the highest standards. The air turns from warm to cold in a single beat. The laughter vanishes. The host can't find a joke to save the moment. I can hear my own breathing beneath the black fabric. From the crowd, some faces no longer look toward the stage but down at their phones, mass emails, cancellations, emergency meetings. Ryan stands frozen, silent. The microphone slips from his hand, hitting the floor with a small, absurd thud. He looks at me not as a son looks at his mother, but as a man realizing the ground beneath him is thin ice. His lips move. "What did you do?" But no sound comes out. I don't answer. I don't explain. I turn and walk off the stage. As I pass the front row, I hear someone whisper, "Oh my God," someone sigh, someone laugh nervously. I don't look back. I walk straight down the steps, through the blur of light and murmurs behind me. The small box rests in my hand like a scalpel that's done its work. Clean, dry, final, everything begins somewhere. And the beginning of that shock, the one you just witnessed, was the night I stepped out of the operating room, long past midnight. My phone buzzed inside the lab coat hanging behind the door. A text from the head nurse. A photo taken in the supply room of a new hospital project built by Moorbuild. A tray of gas conduits sat in a plastic bin. The labels were strange, misaligned. She'd typed, "Doctor, these don't look like the standard list. I took a photo for you to see." I zoomed in, read the code, stored it in my mind the way I'd place a tissue sample under a microscope. The gas conduit code in the picture wasn't on the approved list, and the material listed on the label didn't match. I texted back, "Take another shot next to a ruler." The second photo arrived minutes later. The size was 2 millimeters off from the standard used in cardiac surgery. 2 millimeters, an entire world when you're threading through blood vessels. In the following days, I requested copies of the purchase invoices for that project supplier lists, inspection dates. The invoice said Type A, but the photo showed Type B. The suppliers A and B had different names, but shared the same warehouse district address and the same customer service number. I circled it. The inspection date fell exactly during a sudden 3-day discount from a subcontractor. Why would anyone run a 3-day discount unless they needed to push something out the door fast? I didn't call Ryan. I knew if I spoke before the facts were thick enough, I'd be dragged into a word game. Cost optimization, risk management, agile supply chains. I didn't want to argue semantics. I wanted data. A lawyer friend referred me to a forensic audit team. My instructions were simple: follow the money and follow the goods. They explained the process in plain language: trace the funds from the investor, see where they flow, to the contractor, then the supplier, then check if any of it circles back into a personal account. For every link, they gathered receipts, photos, delivery logs, and all of it led to one conclusion: my son's company was doing business without ethics, misrouted funds, duplicate subcontractor contracts with matching fingerprints, internal emails directing teams to take shortcuts to meet deadlines. Their report ended with one understated line: "These practices increase patient risk." I sat in my office with that file, door closed, for a long time. I thought of the little boy who used to sleep on my on-call chair, the one who once ran around the living room wearing my white coat, saying he'd build hospitals so I wouldn't have to work nights. And I reminded myself, good memories have no right to erase hard evidence. I didn't go to the Moorbuild office. I knew those glass walls would make me weak. Instead, I wrote 2 letters. The first was to the entire CardiaLink ecosystem, the medical procurement network I'd founded for one reason only: to block unsafe solutions that endanger patients. The message was brief: suspending partnership with Moorbuild due to suspected safety violations. The second was to a federal agency summarizing the evidence, requesting an official investigation, attaching shipment lists, and involved entities. I didn't use the language of accusation. I used batch numbers, transfer dates, signatures. I left both letters in draft mode. Every morning before surgery, I opened my inbox, read the 2 subject lines, then closed it again. I wanted to believe my son could stop if he saw the line he was about to cross. I sent him a single text: "I want to see you protect the patients first." He called, talked about expansion pressure, impatient shareholders, innovation. His voice steady, rehearsed like a speech. I said only one thing: in the operating room, innovation comes after safety. Out there, it should be the same. The call ended without resolution. Then I chose the moment. Not for drama, but because evidence needs to anchor itself to a public instant, one that no internal email can erase. The 10-year anniversary of Moorbuild was the moment when all eyes would be watching the one place where, if I pressed my hand, the leverage would be strong enough to stop everything in time. When Senator Clark said the name CardiaLink from the stage, I knew the door had opened. There was no more waiting for an apology. It was already far too late. The side door of the banquet hall closed behind me. The music and the sound of heels faded, as if someone were slowly turning down the volume inside my head. A long hallway, thick carpet, the scent of polished wood. I walked quickly, avoiding the mirrors lining both sides. The underground parking lot was cool and still. I opened the car door, sat down, and shut it. The silence felt like sealing the lid on a metal box. The overhead light flicked on. My face sat neatly inside a small circle of light calm, almost expressionless. The phone vibrated nonstop, missed calls, texts, emails piling over one another. I switched it to silent, letting the screen glow without reading a thing. A question surfaced before I could stop it. Did I just save someone? Or did I just wound myself, wound my own son? I closed my eyes for a moment, and memories of long on-call nights flooded back like a film in reverse. The yellow light of the staff room, the distant beep of monitors, a small boy curled up on the couch, sneakers on the floor, his red backpack for a pillow. Ryan never went home until I'd changed out of my scrubs. He'd tug at the sleeve of my white coat and ask, "Mom, what makes a heart start beating again?" And I'd tell him, patience and following the right procedure. He'd nod furiously, as if he'd just been told a great secret. I opened my eyes and answered myself, kindness, when used to cover wrongdoing, becomes corruption. Kindness must never be used to legitimize harm. The words sounded dry, but they were the lock that kept my hands steady. I lowered the seat back, took a deep breath. My pulse was steady. I placed my hands on the steering wheel, going through the motions I do before an incision, identify the point, check the instruments, confirm the target. Here, the target had been chosen, the tools used, the incision made. All that was left was to keep it clean. I drove up the ramp. At the side entrance, a man with a camera darted across, holding up a press badge. He tapped lightly on my window. I rolled it down halfway. He spoke quickly, his tone polite but tight. "Dr. Moore, why did Cardiolink cut ties in the middle of tonight's event?" I looked straight at him and answered briefly, "Patient safety is the priority." He opened his mouth to ask another question. I placed my hand back on the wheel, gave a small nod instead of a goodbye, rolled the window up, shifted gears. No more words. Long sentences only muddy the water. The road home cut through the city lights. Reflections smeared across the windshield like an erratic ECG line. The phone, though on silent, still pulsed faintly in the cup holder, one rhythm for a text, another for a sent email. Cardiolink's system was doing its work, collective, precise, synchronized. I thought of the people staring at their screens in the ballroom, investors, legal advisors, PR staff. They would search for the right words. I wouldn't. Near an intersection, a thought came sharp, unwelcome. If my son apologized right now, would I show mercy? I waited at a red light, watching a couple push a stroller across the crosswalk, their faces turned toward each other, oblivious to the breaking news lighting up the city tonight. I counted in my head, like timing the release of a clamp before restoring blood flow. 1, 2, 3, green light. The tires rolled forward. "Answer me, Evelyn." No, an apology can't replace standards. Some things an apology might ease the speaker's guilt, but it can't rebuild the foundation. Closer to home, I turned the radio on, then off again. I didn't want any voices intruding on the fragile seams that had just been exposed. My house appeared dark and orderly, as every night. The white door, the stone steps, the maple by the porch. I parked, unbuckled, picked up the small box, and went inside. The click of the lock sounded unnaturally loud. I turned on the TV but muted it. A news ticker scrolled across the bottom. Cardiolink terminates partnership with Moorbuild. The screen cut between footage of the hotel stage and the company headquarters. A shot of me on stage flashed for half a second, then vanished. I watched the anchor's lips move but heard no sound. Tomorrow, I might be called every name imaginable. I might have to repeat a sentence everyone will grow tired of hearing. Standards are paramount. And maybe, at some point, my voice will waver when someone asks, "Why your own son?" I don't have an answer that can make any of it look good. I only have one thing left to do it right. My phone lit up. I looked, but didn't touch. Ryan's name glowed at the top of the screen, then disappeared as it went dark again. I wouldn't read it tonight. Not out of coldness, but because reading it now would make me a negotiator standing beside an operating table still wet with blood. The next morning, the newspaper landed on my doorstep with a heavy thud like a period at the end of a long sentence. I opened the door and picked it up. The headline covered half the front page. Moorbuild faces partnership termination and ethics investigation. My name appeared halfway down the column, brief, without adjectives. The journalist had done their job well. I set the paper on the kitchen counter and started the coffee maker. My hands trembled slightly from lack of sleep, but my breathing was steady like before a surgery whose sequence I already knew by heart. The phone blinked with breaking news alerts. Moorbuild stock plummets at market open. Multiple funds announce withdrawals. Banks issue statements reviewing credit exposure. Words have no scent, but I knew their weight. I didn't look for the details. I didn't need to. I only needed to know the wheel was already turning. My inbox filled with a few short emails from hospital directors. Thank you for putting patient safety first. No emojis, no long sentences. I pressed my lips together. Not exactly joy, but a sense of relief, clean and quiet. I carried my coffee into the office. On the shelf sat Ryan's graduation photo, black gown, bright smile, eyes saying, "Look, I made it through the first gate." Beneath it, an old card, the writing crooked. "Thanks, Mom. I did it." I held it longer than a single breath. You once wanted to build places that save lives. When did that change? There was no one to answer. Or maybe I didn't look closely enough, too busy saving others to notice my own son. The rustle of paper in my hands sounded like the whisper of surgical scrubs before an operation. I placed the photo back, smoothed the card, closed the drawer. No tears. They helped no one. By noon, I turned the TV on. A live report in front of Moorbuild's glass building. Employees walking out with cardboard boxes, faces lowered, a few turning away from the cameras. The anchor handed the mic to a mid-level manager who spoke in neutral tones, as if reading from a manual. The company is cooperating with authorities, prioritizing community interest, and temporarily adjusting operations. That afternoon, the hospital was busier than usual. 2 surgeries, a quick debrief with the post-op team. My colleagues avoided mentioning the news not out of fear, but out of respect for the boundary between professional work and my private storm. In the hallway, a resident passing by greeted me, eyes pausing for half a second before moving on. I recognized that look, not judgment, just quiet acknowledgement that someone had pushed open a heavy door on behalf of others. By evening, I came home late. I opened the lunchbox I'd brought back but never touched, ate a few bites, then stopped. The phone pulsed with missed calls and messages. I held it in my palm, the cold aluminum back clearing my thoughts. The city outside kept moving to its own rhythm. I leaned back, picturing the hospitals now reviewing their supply chains, department heads, head nurses, biomedical engineers, checking inventories, marking replacements. Good people never run out of work to do. The phone lit up again, an unknown number. A text, just one line. "Thank you. My mother is a heart patient. No name. No details." I typed back. "I hope she recovers well." I set the phone down. The short sentence felt like a single-held note, enough to keep rhythm. I didn't try to make it longer. Tonight, silence would do more good than any explanation. I turned to the sink, turned on the water, and let it run over my hands for a while, the cold tightening the veins at my wrists, reminding me my body was still here, bound by the same demand. To uphold the standard. And my son would have to pay the rightful price for what he had done. The law firm's office was on the 10th floor, its windows overlooking the pale gray Charles River. The conference table was covered with thick stacks of files, pages clipped with colored tabs, red for subcontractor contracts, blue for invoices, yellow for internal emails. My attorney pulled a metal binder clip toward himself, speaking in the calm, measured tone of a pilot reading a pre-flight checklist. "First, we'll transfer all evidence to the prosecutor's office. I'll prepare an index so they can verify the origin of each document. Second, whistleblower protection, you fall under that category. Your identity will be kept confidential as needed, and all communication will go through a secure channel. Third, we'll separate civil and criminal liabilities, what pertains to compensation and what pertains to prosecution." He set the pen down and looked at me. "I'm keeping it short so it's easy to remember. My team will handle the rest." I nodded. He slid each file in front of me, one by one. I signed. Each signature felt like taking a deep breath. My palms were damp, but my hand didn't shake. The meeting room for the federal investigative team was across the street, small, plain walls, a wooden table, 3 people. The first asked, clearly and to the point, "Source of the first photo of the medical supplies?" The head nurse sent it to me after comparing it with the standard catalog. The second, "How did you obtain the internal emails?" through CardiaLink's internal compliance process with authorization for review. The third. Who else knew about this before last night? My attorney and the audit team. No one else. I kept every answer concise, no metaphors, no detours. When they asked about motive, I said, patient safety. 3 words placed on the table like a stone, heavy enough not to drift away. They took notes, confirmed timestamps, asked for clarification on a few points. I handed over a photocopy of a flowchart, simple arrows tracing the money from the investor to the contractor, then branching out. After a long and careful review, they read the meeting record aloud. I nodded in agreement. The next appointment was scheduled. The lead investigator handed me a slip with the time and room number. We shook hands, brief, firm. The elevator descended slowly. My phone buzzed 3 times inside my purse. I leaned back against the steel wall and unlocked the screen. The messages appeared in order, Ryan's name at the top. Mom, let me make it right. I'll fix the process. The punctuation was perfect, the tone clipped, professional, like one of his memos to shareholders. Short, firm, full of promise. The next message hit like a discordant note. You destroyed me. You always think you're right. No more business phrasing, just raw anger, cornered and hot. The third message arrived just as the elevator doors slid open at the lobby. People stepped in. I moved aside and read the last line. Moorbuild is falling apart. I don't even know where to start. 3 messages, 3 colors, pleading, fury, despair. I looked at them the way I would at 3 distorted heartbeats on the same monitor. I didn't reply. I slipped the phone back into my bag, walked through the lobby, and turned down the hallway toward the exit door that led to the parking lot. The choice had been harder because it was family. But for the greater community, more and more people were beginning to understand and respect that choice, people I'd never even imagined. And that thought brought me a small, steady peace. The cafe on the corner across from Boston Medical Center was packed at lunchtime. I chose a table by the window, my back to the bar so the noise would fade a little. They arrived right on time. Jennifer came first, camel coat, dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep. 2 women in their 40s followed, dressed in business attire, each carrying folders. They set everything on the table. Invoices printed from emails, photos of shipment codes, photocopies of subcontractor contracts with certain lines blacked out. I'm Jennifer, she said softly, not meeting my eyes. I used to laugh at you at those events. I thought you were cold, distant, but I was wrong, completely wrong. I'm sorry. She pushed an envelope toward me. These are receipts Marcus left behind before he moved. Moorbuild used a contractor that changed its name 3 times in 1 year. Same legal representative each time. The other 2 women introduced themselves briefly. One had invested in a local hospital construction fund. The other was an accountant from a nonprofit that had contracted Moorbuild to renovate its recovery wing. They opened their folders, photos of supply warehouses, crooked labels, delivery slips with mismatched serial numbers, and internal emails urging teams to rush the shipment to make the grand opening on time. The air smelled of coffee and freshly printed paper. Why are you giving me these? I asked. The accountant answered, because you had the courage to stand up. When one person stands tall in that kind of room, the rest of us finally dare to put our evidence on the table. Jennifer took a sip of water, set the glass down slowly. I was there. I laughed. And then I saw my own face in a distorted mirror. I don't want to be that person anymore. She touched the envelope. I want to fix what can still be fixed. The air around the table felt like it does before surgery, cautious, but focused. I turned over each page, scanning them with my phone's document app, adjusting the light to make the embossed stamps visible in the corners. We'll need to group the files by project, I said. Each site gets its own set. Contracts, subcontractors, warehouse photos, delivery receipts. Label them by date and location. Leave out commentary, keep only facts. If there are internal emails, include the subject line and timestamp. I have a hard drive, the investor said. All the correspondence with the project office. Make me a copy, I replied. Keep the original. Don't send it over text. Only encrypted email or in-person handoff. Jennifer looked at me, her voice rough. You're going to hate me in a minute. I don't have time to hate, I said, but I have time to organize. As they stood to leave, I scheduled another meeting for that afternoon at the hospital's small conference room, 3rd floor. Be on time, bring everything in order. We can't afford to miss a detail just because we're in a hurry. The small conference room had a rectangular wooden table, a whiteboard, and a window overlooking the ambulance bay. My attorney sat at one end, laptop open. Next to him was the representative from the federal investigation team. He gave only his first name, no business card, and an independent specialist in hospital construction compliance who had worked for a major New England health network. Jennifer and the two women arrived with their labeled folders. I sat facing the door. I like to see who comes in and out. My attorney began. 3 principles. 1. Protect the whistleblowers. 2. Preserve document integrity. 3. Maintain a clean communication channel. We meet on a fixed schedule, no off-record texting. Whoever receives anything signs for it. Original documents stay with their owners. We only hold encrypted copies. The investigator nodded. We don't need stories. We need timelines, signatures, batch numbers, and contractor name changes. The fewer adjectives, the faster we move. The compliance expert drew a simple flowchart with a marker. This is the standard route for an approved supply chain. Anything that deviates from it, mark it red. Jennifer glanced at me, waiting for judgment. No one here is to justify themselves, I said. We're here to do our part correctly. I instructed them to sort materials by project: Boston, Providence, Worcester. Each stack went into its own folder, scanned, stored on 2 separate devices. My attorney provided a list of encrypted email addresses and temporary logins for the new participants. Protect your identities, he said, and preserve your right to join any future claims for restitution. I added, and protect yourselves. From now on, if anyone contacts you suggesting an internal resolution, notify us immediately. No private meetings, no anonymous calls, no signing anything you haven't read out loud. They nodded. Jennifer's hand trembled on the folder before she pulled it back and clasped her fingers together under the table. I glanced at the schedule: regular meetings twice a week, staged submissions starting with the highest risk projects, all communication through a shared email managed by counsel. I could see the path forming, quiet, deliberate, one solid step at a time. The meeting ran longer than planned. We photographed, signed, labeled, documented. No small talk. When the sunlight tilted across the window, I felt a new weight settle on my shoulders, steadier now that others were walking with me, but heavier too, because from here on, any misstep could drag them down with me. When it ended, the investigator packed the files into a waterproof case, saying he'd submit them through protocol. The compliance specialist scheduled a date for a random warehouse inspection. The attorney finalized a summary email and sent out the weekly calendar. Jennifer lingered at the door. Do you need me to do anything else? Tomorrow, 8 a.m., I said. Bring the Providence set. And if anyone asks why you're doing this, just say one thing. For the patients. They left. I stayed behind, looking at the folders still on the table, the edges of paper sticking out like open incisions waiting to be closed. Outside the window, dusk settled over the rooftops. I sat down, laid both hands flat on the table, feeling the cold surface seep into my skin. I thought of the night I pressed send, of the brief thank you messages, of my son's texts. From a single person pushing open a door, I'd become a place for others to lean on. Their support didn't make the weight lighter, it just made the path clearer. After a long, hard stretch, we finally had a shared framework and a phased submission plan. No promises, just work to be done. I turned off the lights, pulled the door shut, and heard the lock click dry, precise like a surgical clamp holding firm. Outside, the Boston wind swept down the corridor. I pulled my coat tighter around my neck. The burden had grown heavier by 1 degree, but my back was straighter than ever. I took the stairs, one step at a time, carrying both things at once. When I returned to my office, I saw an envelope lying in the middle of the stack of files. No sender, no seal, just my name, hastily written in the corner. I touched the rough edge of the paper. Inside was a folded letter, Ryan's handwriting uneven, the way it looked when he used to make me cards as a child, only now without the little smiling arrows at the end of each line. I stood, leaning against the desk as I read. I pushed Moorbuild faster than it could bear. A new goal every week, a new speech every quarter. I was afraid of losing, afraid of seeing your face when I missed the numbers. I told the team cutting corners was temporary. I knew I was lying. Short sentences, no embellishments. At the banquet, I thought a joke would bridge the distance. I chose the wrong language. I was wrong. At the end, his handwriting tilted sharply to the right, as if pushed. I'm not asking you to save me. I just want one thing. Let's do it the right way this time. If you can't say it today, say it when you feel safe. I pressed the paper against my palm, as if feeling for a pulse through skin, not for forgiveness, but to confirm there was still a living person on the other end, not just a case file. Warmth spread from my hand into the page. I folded the letter and set it beside the red tabbed folder. Outside, the steady rhythm of nurses' footsteps passed the door, a familiar metronome, pulling me back to work. Pediatric surgery, room 2. An 8-year-old girl, congenital heart defect. The team was waiting. I scrubbed in, gloved up, adjusted my cap. We reviewed the checklist. Scalpel, clamps, needles, sutures correct, complete, ready. The anesthesiologist confirmed a steady rhythm. I took my position and signaled for the lights to lower. We opened the chest with a smaller incision than usual, minimizing trauma where possible. The scrub nurse handed me each instrument before I spoke. Through the corner of the lamp, I saw the malformed section like a map drawn wrong from the start. Some mistakes are born of no one's doing, but they still demand correction. I held my breath, placed the clamp, shifted slightly, waited for the monitor's rhythm to stabilize before proceeding. The whole room stilled a thin film of silence over water. Angle, I said quietly. The resident adjusted his mirror, narrowing the light beam. Everything came into focus. I cut and stitched along familiar paths, reminding myself at each step, never assume. At one point, a suture loosened half a turn. I paused, asked for time. No one rushed me. 2 seconds. 3. I tightened it firm enough to hold, light enough not to strangle. The numbers on the monitor climbed back into the safe zone. A soft exhale escaped somewhere behind me. Stable, I said. We continued. No moment of glory, only a series of correct actions. After a long, difficult stretch, the heart frame moved smoothly again, the color on the screen returning like a melody restored. I looked at the child through the maze of wires and sensors, a small body ready to reclaim the rhythm stolen at birth. Begin closure, I said. The needle moved evenly, the skin drew close, the line clean. I removed my gloves, washed again, lifted my face to the steam-warm vapor, opening the capillaries at my neck. The glass corridor connected the OR to recovery. My reflection was faint, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. I rested my hand on the railing, looking down at the vents scattered across the roof. Justice can be dry, I murmured, as if to an invisible trainee. But forgiveness without boundaries kills more people than justice ever could. The words echoed in my head not to harden me, but to remind me where the line stands. Back in my office, I opened the drawer, slid Ryan's letter into a plastic sleeve, and placed it in the deepest compartment. I didn't burn it. I didn't reply. I left it there like a surgical drain, something that shows the color of what's still bleeding, but hurts if touched too soon. My phone buzzed. It was my attorney. His voice calm, dry, the way it sounds after repeating the same update all day. The court has set the trial date. The witness list was finalized this morning. We'll need to prepare your statement. I looked out the window. On the sidewalk below, someone pushed a wheelchair, their steps steady. I'll testify, I said. Not as the defendant's mother, as the head of a medical ethics initiative. He replied, understood, and went over the timelines, the commitments, the chain of custody for the documents. I nodded and ended the call. I sat for a moment, feeling as though I'd just removed a metal band from my wrist. The room settled into quiet again, the low hum of the vent, the rustle of paper as I pulled another file forward. Ryan's words echoed. Do it the right way. I couldn't give him an answer yet, nor would I lock the question away forever. I'd let it move alongside my work in every audit, every cross-check, every call with an investigator. Before leaving, I checked the letter once more, the way you check a stitch before applying the bandage. The paper was still there, still. I closed the drawer, the metal rails sliding shut with a clean click. Outside, a cart rolled past. A patient's family whispered. A child laughed softly. The world kept running on small sounds. That evening, on my way home, I parked beside the park near the river. The water was dark, the wind cold. I sat in the car, hands on the wheel, watching people tighten their coats as they walked. No one looked at the sky, only the road ahead. And I thought, that's how it should be. Look far enough to know where you're going, but keep your eyes on where your wheels touch the ground. When faced with the truth, the only relationship that truly needs protecting is the one between a person and their conscience. I started the engine, turned the wheel, merged into traffic. Somewhere ahead, a courtroom waited for me, questions, scrutiny, the weight of someone's gaze. And somewhere else, a child slept with a newly mended heart. I chose to stand on the side of the heart not because it's warm, but because there, I know how to make it beat right. On the morning of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Cameras stood shoulder to shoulder. Cables sprawled across the floor like veins, footsteps echoing off the marble. The wooden doors were heavy, the handle cold. I stood at the threshold, breathing evenly in, out, steady, the same rhythm as before an incision. I didn't look at the cameras. I looked at my hands, faint glove lines still marking the joints. An usher whispered, "This way, Dr. Moore." I nodded, walked in. The scent of varnished wood mingled with paper and fresh ink. The courtroom felt like an operating theater. Gallery, defense table, prosecution, jury box. When the judge entered, every sound fell away. The prosecutor opened plainly, without theatrics. He pulled up a series of slides. Internal emails with directives. Drive prices down. Fast-track route. Cut specs on non-visible components. Arrows traced the flow of money from the investment fund to contractors, splitting into smaller sums, merging into a shadow account. Side by side, charts showed materials and invoices. Product names changing each quarter, but warehouse addresses fixed. Contractor firms renamed 3 times. Same legal signatory. Each mouse click, click, click landed, like the rhythm of a surgical clamp. After a thorough review of the evidence, the prosecutor concluded, the pattern is clear. Profit circulated, quality declined. The first witness was the chief anesthesiologist from a nearby hospital. He described a post-op emergency, an air tube that slipped out of spec, pressure plummeting mid-surgery, the team scrambling to bring back the rhythm. His tone was calm, factual, not accusatory, just a description of what happens when one detail drifts half a step off. The second witness, a scrub nurse, looked straight at the microphone. She spoke of an email instructing her to confirm cross-check completed by end of day to meet the delivery deadline. If I didn't sign, the whole department would get marked down, she said. She signed under pressure, then lay awake all night in fear. The word fear fell to the floor like a small steel clamp. The second needle went in slower, deeper. The third witness was a retired man. He'd invested his savings into the hospital construction fund, believing it was the right thing and safe. He didn't mention returns, only his wife, a former heart patient, and the sense of betrayal when he read the headline about cut standards. His voice broke on one word. He paused, breathed, continued. That needle stayed in place, no need to turn it. I sat straighter, as if to keep it from touching bone. Then it was my turn. I stood, resting my hand lightly on the edge of the wooden podium. "I'm a cardiac surgeon," I began. "Every day, we place instruments on a part of the body that demands absolute respect. One wrong cut, the consequence is immediate. In medical infrastructure, standards aren't words on paper. They are where a patient lives or dies." I looked toward the jury. "Our boundary is safety. Whoever crosses it bears responsibility. Cutting away necrosis hurts, but letting it spread hurts more." I stopped there. No metaphors. Long sentences would only dull the short ones. The defense lawyer began his cross-examination. I answered only what was asked, no parentheses. "Why didn't you handle it internally?" "I tried," the conduct continued. "Why make it public?" "So it wouldn't be buried in another email." "Do you have a personal motive?" "Yes. My personal motive is the patient's." Someone in the gallery bowed their head, perhaps to write that down. Simple words, enough to silence any excess argument. There came a moment when we had to look at each other. Ryan stood, procedure required it, clean-shaven, dark circles under his eyes, suit immaculate, like a newspaper photo reversed in color. When his lawyer permitted, he turned toward me. "If you could do it all over again," he asked quietly, "would you choose differently?" The room seemed to drop a tone. I didn't search for a graceful answer. "I'd choose to speak sooner," I said. "But I'd still choose the truth." Something crossed his eyes, not a tear, but fatigue. He sat down, hands clasped, nails pressing into his palms. I returned to my seat. Neither of us had any speeches left. When the judge came back with the verdict, I heard the soft rustle of paper like surgical gowns before an operation. He read each clause clearly. Federal prison terms based on degree of violation, specific durations, civil compensation for affected institutions and individuals, mandated independent oversight and process reforms across the supply chain, regular progress reports to the court. No applause, no outcry. The judgment landed like a block of metal heavy enough to stop the sliding door. I felt no triumph. My body reacted the way it does when the final stitch is tied. No spike in heart rate, no trembling hands, only the quiet, familiar spread of calm air after the lights go out in an OR. I closed my eyes once, opened them, looked at the empty space between benches, no one there, yet I felt an invisible thread being drawn tight. Outside, sunlight hit hard, white and clean. Street noise bounced off the pavement. Reporters shouted questions that faded as the court officers signaled there'd be a statement later. I paused on the top step, inhaled deeply. Dry wind, chalk dust, fresh paper. My hand rested on the cold railing, the grain of the wood like fine lines across my wrist. It was done. Now came the watch for infection. I stepped down slowly, one stair at a time, merging into the crowd. Behind me, the heavy doors closed, keeping inside all the words spoken and the ones that never were. Ahead, the road opened like a long corridor to recovery, where people wait not for explanations, but for stable readings. After the verdict, my schedule filled up again, but differently this time. Fewer courtrooms, more conference rooms. The Federal Healthcare Reform Committee met in a plain building, glass walls, a long table, short microphones. I sat as an independent advisor on procurement and inspection standards. Before me were thick binders of fine print, 2 columns marked transparency and safety. Representatives from public and private hospitals, suppliers, professional associations, and oversight agencies took turns speaking. They used the familiar language of the industry. Costs, timelines, risks. I added another layer. Streamline supply verification without skipping steps. Mandate price transparency. Publicize every source. Require cross-checks at a minimum of 2 independent facilities. One member objected. "Doctor, that will slow down the process." "Better a week's delay in paperwork," I replied, "than an unnecessary mistake in the operating room." The association's representative nodded. The discussion circled questions, revisions, precise wording. After a long and difficult session, the reform proposal passed the vote. Looking at the list of mandatory items marked in green, I felt as if a young tree had just been braced against the wind. A message from the Correctional Oversight Office arrived on my phone, an update about Ryan. He'd been assigned to a suburban community hospital, rotating through jobs waste collection, transporting supply bins, organizing storerooms, logging deliveries. No photo, just a few lines of report. I didn't comfort myself that this was enough. I simply noted, the first step is honest work. The next steps would be harder. When I agreed to see him again, we chose the community room at the hospital where he now worked. The space was simple, large window, round wooden table, a water cooler in the corner. He came in wearing the light blue uniform of a logistics worker, sleeves rolled up, nails trimmed short. He pulled out a chair across from me, sat upright. No long apology, just, "I want to start over." I placed a folder on the table, the redevelopment plan for Detroit Community Health Summary, projected budget, list of potential contractors, oversight framework. "This project starts small," I said, "but its principles must be big." I pointed to the bold lines. Independent supervision required. Full financial and sourcing transparency. Immediate suspension rights upon any detected violation. Anonymous employee reporting channel. "If you agree," I said, "you'll join the technical team with no signing authority. You'll learn every step of a single screw's path from warehouse to operating room. And if you step off principle, this door closes immediately." He nodded, eyes steady. "I understand." My hand was still resting on the edge of the folder like holding a door handle, open but not released. I told myself, open the door, but keep your hand on it in case it needs to close. We began forming the team. An elderly engineer with silver hair came out of retirement for one reason only. "I want to see a building done right, from the foundation up." 2 young architects, one grew up in Detroit, brought sketches for a playground inside the hospital. Kids should see the sky before they see a needle, he said, and a community liaison who knew how to work with neighborhood councils and local churches. I looked at them gathered around the table, none famous, none with glossy resumes, but their eyes carried the quiet weight of people who know responsibility seeps into your sleeves every day. Our first meeting in Detroit was held in a small room at City Hall. I spread out the project codebook and spoke plainly. No vague contracts, no shadow subcontractors, no 3-day discounts in exchange for skipping audits. The old engineer chuckled. Talk like that, and not many people will stay at the table. Then the ones who do, I said, are exactly the ones we need. The community coordinator added. Every public meeting gets minutes posted online. Anyone asks about costs, we answer with numbers, not adjectives. We nodded and wrote it into record. Ryan stayed mostly quiet, taking notes. When the agenda reached supply management, he proposed a 2-layer verification system for the warehouse. One person logs, another cross-checks. Switching roles weekly with cameras meeting minimum storage standards, data sent directly to the hospital's central server, never through personal devices. I looked at him. I didn't praise, just asked, who's responsible when the 2 records don't match? The shift supervisor, he said. But if the fault's in the system, I take responsibility first. The room went silent for a few seconds. Then someone nodded and recorded it in the minutes. At the end, I handed Ryan a thin folder, the project's voluntary code of conduct. Each clause had its own blank for a signature. Every page is a promise, I said. He uncapped his pen and signed each one, line by line, without skipping a single box. When he finished, he closed the folder and slid it back toward me, his hands steady, his writing even. No grand speeches, just ink and intent. The night before groundbreaking, I stayed late in the office. A scale model of the new hospital sat on the table, white blocks representing the clinic, diagnostics wing, surgery unit. The desk lamp glowed warm. My shadow stretched long across the wall. I checked the list again. Permits, insurance, contracts, excavation schedule, emergency contacts. Outside, the city was cooling, traffic thinning, only a few lines of light trailing across the glass. I ran my fingertip along the model from the entrance to the emergency bay, no blind turns. My phone lit up. An email confirming the survey equipment had arrived on site. I turned the screen off and let the silence stay. Leaning back, I looked around at the room crowded with plans and files. Some nights you choose to stay in the dark because that's where you can find the clean bricks. Other nights you walk through it because if you don't, someone else will claim the road. I thought of Ryan signing his name, of the old engineer polishing his glasses, of the child who would one day run beneath the hospital courtyard, under sunlight, never knowing that below, someone once refused a 3-day discount. I exhaled slowly the way I do before turning off the lights in an operating room. One person can make mistakes, but a system must make them right. The lawn in front of the new hospital gleamed young and even, the small flags at the entrances fluttering in the wind like steady breaths. Children held their parents' hands, running circles around the white tents. A few local reporters set up their cameras neatly, microphone cords coiled close to their feet. A white banner bore the hospital's name, no flashy fonts, just clear, clean letters. The community representative stood on the wooden stage and spoke briefly. A thank you to those who built a place just beautiful enough. What matters is that it's strong and built right. I stood below, one hand resting on the edge of the emergency protocol folder, eyes tracing the fire pipes running along the wall like a familiar chart I knew by heart. Ryan stood half a step behind me, holding the safety manual we'd reviewed for weeks. He wasn't holding a microphone. He nodded when he heard the words, "built right." I didn't turn around, but I saw his nod reflected on the polished cement floor. After the ceremony, I walked around to the surgical wing. The first operation. A teenage boy, cardiac trauma from a baseball strike, impact right at the soft point. His family had signed consent the night before. He was transferred overnight, every pre-op step aligned like clockwork. The team was ready. Anesthesiologist, scrub nurse, resident, biomedical engineer, at the control board, the monitors glowing warm and steady. We went through the checklist. Instruments complete, supplies correct, lot numbers matched, certifications valid, each line read aloud like an oath. I took my position. The lights lowered. The monitors ticked in rhythm, a perfect metronome. No miracles required, just the right process, the right people, the right conscience. We opened the chest through the smallest possible incision to save as much of the healthy tissue as we could. Ryan stood outside the observation glass, shoulders tense when the scalpel met skin. I gave a two-finger signal, our code for, "Everything's fine." The team moved seamlessly. No one spoke out of turn. As we reached the damaged area, I signaled to dim the light one level and adjust the angle. We repaired the lesion, placed the holding sutures, checked the flow. The monitor shifted from gray to green. The rhythm tone returned to normal. Someone in the corner let out a breath. I heard it clearly because the entire room had gone silent, listening for the same thing. We closed up the line of sutures straight as ink, skin drawn tight. No one made speeches. No one congratulated anyone. We simply turned to post-op protocol, the next page of the same book. The family room smelled of fresh paper, like all newly opened hospitals. The boys' parents sat close together, fingers laced tight. When I said the surgery was successful, the mother covered her face and wept uncontrollably. The father stood still for a beat, then bowed his head deeply, as if greeting someone unseen. I explained what to monitor, what signs to call about. They thanked me over and over, their voices trembling and uneven. I stepped back into the glass hallway. Ryan was outside, not daring to enter, staring at the door like a man before a river unsure how cold the water runs. I motioned him closer. He stopped at a respectful distance. "This is what we owe them, safety," I said. He nodded, eyes rimmed red, not searching for long words. Silence was right. Here, we walked out to the main lobby. The midday light hit the glass, turning the city's sky into panels of silver blue. By the entrance stood a new plaque on a stone base. I brushed my fingers lightly across the metal. "Rebuilt with Heart Amour Project." The raised letters were cold, smooth. Ryan stood beside me, far enough away that I didn't need to step back. I kept my hand on the words for a few seconds, then withdrew. The plaque wasn't a badge of honor. It was a reminder each morning that everything begins with the heart, humble, precise, and unborrowed. By late afternoon, the wind moved through the trees along the entrance, the leaves rustling like fabric on the courthouse steps from that other day. The last of the reporters packed up, the tech truck reversed out of the lot. The lobby quieted. The hum of the air conditioner blended with the guard's footsteps and the faint roll of a wheelchair down the corridor. Ryan still held the codebook in his hands, looking at it like a folded map. I walked toward him. No music, no applause. Only the wind through the trees. I hugged him. His body was firm, but his chest eased on the second breath. "I'll keep following this code," he said softly, as if afraid to wake someone sleeping upstairs. "Hold on to it," I said. "The way you hold a heartbeat." No more words were needed. We stood for a while before returning to our work, I to a post-op check, he to a supply transfer shift. On the way back in, I paused at the glass door, watching the city sky reflected there. Our shadows, mother and son, overlapped for a moment, then separated, then moved together toward the entrance. I understood then. What's cut away doesn't disappear in a day. Scars of the heart take longer to heal than those on skin. But scars are useful. They remind us where we've been, where we cut, and how we stitched. Night fell. I returned to the recovery ward, watching the boys monitor. Stable. The light soft, the machine's pulse steady, his small body warming against white sheets. A nurse leaned close and whispered, "Good work." I smiled just slightly and stepped out to let them finish. In the lobby, the plaque still stood cold as the tip of a steel instrument, strong as a good suture thread. I placed a hand over my chest, feeling the rhythm. Not fast, not slow, just steady. The heart never forgets its scars, but the scars are what remind it to beat right. I dimmed the hallway lights, leaving a single strip to guide the way out. Tonight, the city would sleep with one less worry about one corner of its hospitals. Tomorrow would bring new tasks, new inspections, new signatures, new questions. I stepped into the elevator and caught my reflection in the polished steel. The person standing there was still a surgeon, steady with scalpel and stitch, and also a mother who had learned when to let go. The doors closed quietly. I let the silence stay. And in that silence, the heartbeat of a new hospital synced itself with the body of the city, and it was beating. The story you just heard is fictional, but every heartbeat, every decision, every cold incision made by that woman comes from a real truth. There are mothers who, when forced to choose between blood and conscience, still choose conscience. Not because they stopped loving, but because they understand that love can never be an excuse to betray justice. Names and details have been changed to protect the identities of those who might be recognized. We don't tell this story to glorify cruelty, but to remind you that there is another kind of courage, the courage of someone who knows exactly where to place the blade, even when the cut runs straight through her own heart. The courage of those who choose what's right over what's easy, who choose to uphold standards instead of keeping silent. If you've ever had to stand alone for what's right, if you've been called too rigid, too cold, simply because you refuse to bow your head, remember this: your silence might save more lives than 1,000 cries of protest. Leave a comment if you've ever paid a price for holding on to your principles. And if you believe that justice doesn't come from noise, but from the hands that keep the line between right and wrong steady, share this video. Because somewhere out there, someone might need a reason to stay standing. Don't forget to subscribe, because here, every story is a kind of spiritual surgery, cutting away deceit, stitching back trust, and teaching the heart how to beat right again. On the final screen, we're sharing 2 more stories of people who dared to touch the truth, even knowing it would hurt, and who walked out of the dark with their own hands. Trust me, you won't be able to look away.